Today I want to make a video all about beginning gardening skills. How to set up a raised bed, seed starting, transplant planting, how to find transplants if you go to someplace like Home Depot. So this is going to be for your beginning gardener, somebody who's just really new to this, and I'm going to give you tips based upon just the easiest things to acquire. So seeds and transplants. And we're also going to bring my mom in here, and she's going to help us garden as well. I hope you guys enjoy seeing some of the back to basics skills that I hope will help a lot of people maybe who are finding this video and are just getting started on their gardening journey. This is my mom.
Hey everybody.
Just wanted you to meet her, and she's going to be helping us today, and I wanted her to talk about the garden here. When did you start this garden, and what did you make these boxes out of? Before we even go.
Well, the best recollection that I have was about 27, 28 years ago when we moved in here. About 30 years ago, we built some decks and some patio covers, and then at that time we had some leftover wood. And so we decided to go ahead and make some planting boxes that we could grow vegetables, flowers, whatever kind of suited my fancy at the time. I think it's Douglas fir. They've held up actually quite well for this many years. We've got areas where we have some termite damage, but for the most part they've held together really well, and I've grown a lot of vegetables over the years in them.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool to see how long one of these boxes can actually last. So they're talking about like 27 years. And then what were some of the things that we used to grow in these?
Initially we grew tomatoes, onions, strawberries. We did some artichoke. We did squash. That's the majority. And then eventually, the strawberries gave me a lot of problems. Your dad fell in love with pomegranates.
Right.
And
that's why we have these.
So then we went to putting 2 pomegranate trees in one of the beds, let it take over, and they've done really well all the rest of the years.
And then tell them, did I like gardening when I was a little kid?
No, you did not. I thought it was going to be this real creative thing. Get your kids out here, let them help, grow things, see how things grow. Maybe they'll like vegetables more. They didn't. Not at all.
Didn't work.
Didn't work. In fact, I was a bit disappointed. You were a little more helpful than your sister, quite frankly, in the garden. She was more excited in playing sports and skating and doing other things. But I kind of kept it up until your lives got really busy as children and got very involved in what you were doing. And between that and working, at that point I kind of let the garden not do very much other than grow some tomatoes possibly, that kind of thing. And then I just kind of did minimal things.
And then my mom created a really amazing garden just around the yard, all these landscaping plants and flowers, and just created a really beautiful space here. She did blueberries and citrus and pots and stuff. So yeah, if you're a parent out there and you wanted to get your kids interested in gardening, don't give up hope, because I eventually came back to it and I had all those memories of doing all this stuff, so they can still find the love for it. And hey, now we're gardening again in these beds. So all right, let's get to it. Okay. And the first thing that we're gonna do to these beds is just amend them. It's been maybe about a year or 6 months or something like that since they last had some veggies in here. So the first thing we're gonna do is just add some gardening soil, and we're gonna go get some transplants right now at Home Depot, just to show you the simplest way to go get some plants. Of course, local nurseries are fantastic, or if you wanna start your own seeds, we're gonna show you how to start your own seeds here in a few minutes. So let's go to Home Depot.
Here we go.
Let me show you guys my favorite potting soil mix, and I think they have it pretty much throughout the whole country, but you want to look for something that is of course organic and naturally made, no synthetic chemical nutrients. The brand that I like is called Kellogg. This is their raised bed and potting mix, and this one's really great because, let's look at the ingredients: coir, perlite, poultry manure, feather meal, peat moss, kelp meal, worm castings, back guano. So all natural fertilizers, really good nutrients, and it's just a nice soil, nice consistency. You can start seeds with this. Now, of course, at Home Depot or Lowe's, there's a whole lot of other choices, a lot of stuff by like Miracle Grow and companies like that, which I don't recommend buying. Miracle-Gro, they're a synthetic nutrient company. They do make organic stuff now, but they're really just focused on making money. They don't care as much about, you know, making good soil. So that's why Kellogg, if you have, it's the best. And some of the other Kellogg products that are really good, if you just need some garden soil just to kind of pep up your beds, maybe you've already got really good drainage, then these bags are a little bit cheaper. And also it's the same formula, just without the perlite. If you need to top dress any of your trees, things like that, the Grow Mulch is really great because it's going to provide nutrients, and then it's got some larger carbon pieces that'll help retain moisture and prevent weeds. So because my mom's beds are pretty fertile and the soil looks really great, we're just going to add one bed of the raised bed mix per 8x10 bed, and we're going to add in some other nutrients as well that I'll show you when we get back to the house. So now let's go ahead and check out our transplants, and I'll give you some tips on picking transplants and how to pick a healthy one that's going to do really well in your garden. So if you take a look at these two tomatoes here, one thing you want to know is the word indeterminate and determinate. The determinate is a bushing type, so it'll fruit basically just one time. You'll get a lot of fruit and then it'll be done. The indeterminate will keep giving you fruit. It's a vining type, so it'll keep making flowers that'll produce fruit for you. I recommend just always growing indeterminate because you'll have a much longer season of growing. Your two major differences, you're gonna have your cherry tomatoes and then your larger slicing tomatoes. So that's gonna be your decision on what you'd like to grow. The cherry tomatoes, though, are really prolific for a much longer time. And when I was running my urban farm, I grew only cherry tomatoes. I like cherry tomatoes because they don't have problems with rotting or bugs. If you lose one small cherry tomato to a bug, it's not a big deal. If you lose a big tomato, it's a lot more painful, and they just don't produce as many, but they're larger. So now let's just take a look at the transplants and what you would want to look for in a healthy transplant. So first I'm going to show you guys one that I don't think looks very healthy. This is some sort of probably fungal issue. The leaves are a little bit pale or yellowed. Whereas if you look at a transplant over here, you see how green those leaves are, and the entire plant all the way down, even at the lowest level of leaves, they're not very yellowed, which is a good sign because as the plant grows, the lower leaves will get yellow and die off. And I've got a great video on pruning tomatoes that you should watch if you want to learn more about taking care of indeterminate tomatoes. These are all the suckers here. If you see a tomato like this, you see how the leaves are curled. It looks like a worm was on here eating it. So this plant is having issues. So I would definitely not pick this one. You want to find a tomato that has the leaves completely flat and unfurled like this. Any of these look fantastic. So here we have some zucchinis, and now zucchinis, the tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, anything that produces a fruit, it's going to need full sun, so keep that in mind. And you know, all these are going to get very large, so when you're planning out the size of your garden, think about how large these are going to get. These are going to get to about 3 by 3 feet in size. You're also going to notice that some of these have multiple plants in one pot. Now when you go to plant these, you could actually break these apart and get multiple plants out of them. Or you can select for the largest plant, the best looking plant. So that would be this one here. And you could just cut these out away and only plant this one. And you only want to plant one squash plant in one spot. Otherwise they're going to compete for light and you will not get very good fruit. They may even be more susceptible to pests and disease if you do that. So make sure you're planting only one plant in one spot. But you will see at the nurseries that a lot of times this will happen where they've planted multiple seeds, so you get multiple plants. Another great thing to look for at Home Depot is their discount section. These are plants that they let grow a little too long. You can see there's multiple seedlings in there, but as long as the plant still looks healthy, you could totally plant this. Just cut it back to one plant and go for it. That's good.
Okay.
Okay, so we're back from Home Depot with our Kellogg garden soil, and we have two 4-foot by 12-foot beds right here. And what we're gonna do is do the same thing to each bed. So we're gonna pour out one of these Before I do that though, let me show you some other nutrients we were gonna do as well. So from my urban farm, I had a bunch of leftover things like some organic fertilizer, some leftover peat moss, some leftover seeding propagation mix. We're just gonna dump all that in here. So I've got kelp meal, and this is azomite rock dust for minerals. Minerals are super important for your garden, just like humans. If we don't have all the vitamins and minerals we need, it's hard for our bodies to produce the ability to have a strong immune system. And this also feeds the soil life as well. So azomite rock dust is fantastic. And I'll put links down in the description to the different organic fertilizers and minerals, things that I like to use in my garden. So we're just gonna spread a little bit of this out, maybe 2 full cups of azomite over the surface, probably 2 cups or 3 cups of the organic fertilizer, and they always have instructions on the bag to show you how much that you should use for the amount of area. And then now we're gonna add our 1 3 cubic foot bag of garden soil, and this soil was already really good, so we're just doing enough to pep it up. If you're starting your soil from scratch, then you could just use all of the raised bed potting mix from Kellogg, or if you're able to, I would recommend getting some locally made compost that's really high quality, because you're gonna save money and it'll be even better soil than what you can buy at a store. So now we're just gonna rake it and get it even across the whole surface. Now you guys know who watch my channel that I'm super into no-till, which means we're not flipping the soil and mixing the soil layers together. So we're just gonna mix it together here at the surface, and then when it rains or we water this in, that's gonna help to mix these nutrients down deeper into the ground, just like when it rains in a forest. We're also gonna water at the end of this with our plants, and we're gonna even water in some other nutrients that I have left over from my farm, like fish emulsion and seaweed. I'm just gonna show you guys some other things that I'm doing with soil drenching for feeding. But just doing what we did right here, some organic fertilizer, some good composted soil, that's all you really need to grow good plants. So now we've prepared both of our beds with all the amendments and the compost. So now let's get our transplants ready. And we need to put them in positions that are gonna be good for these plants. Now summer fruiting plants like squash, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, cucumbers, anything that produces a fruit, it needs a lot of sunlight in order to produce things really well. So when looking at your yard, it's really important to know where's south, where's west, where's east, where's north. Figure out those positions. In the winter, you're gonna have the sun traveling in the southern sky, but in the summertime, it's gonna really come directly overhead. So the camera right now is facing west. And the 2 corners right here of these boxes get the most sunlight throughout the year, and especially the summer. So that's where we want to have our squash, our tomatoes, our peppers, things like the basil. They don't need as much sunlight, and you can even plant these underneath your tomatoes or with your tomatoes, and that's called interplanting. And that's a really fantastic way of getting more crops in a smaller area. And I have an in-depth video all about that, and I'm gonna put links in the description to some other videos that I've made that will really help you to go more in depth on some of these concepts that I'm just briefly touching on in this beginner video. So the other thing to think about with your light is what's around your garden. So you can see that there's that tree there that's casting a little bit of shade here. So in this back corner, because it gets less light, that's gonna be a great place for greens, for herbs, even like radishes or some of the smaller root vegetables will do really well right there. So look all around your garden. We've got these eucalyptus trees on the west side. So in the late afternoon, those block sun as well. So you really just want to look all around the garden, see what's going to cast shade. You could even come out every couple hours into your garden and see where the shade is before you even plan out your garden. So the next thing, we kind of touched on it at Home Depot, but we need to prepare these transplants. So these squash, because they're so far spaced apart, we're gonna take a knife and just cut through here to try to separate the roots out. It is gonna damage the plants a little bit. The most guaranteed way to have the healthiest plant would be to come in here with some pruners and just clip out the weaker or smaller looking one and plant the entire root ball into the ground. But in order to save money, if they're far enough apart like this, that's about 2.5 inches apart, you can actually save these. So that's what we're gonna do. Now, on your tomatoes need to be prepped by removing the couple bottom leaves, because we're gonna actually bury this up until about here, right below this first leaf here. And when you do that on a tomato, it'll actually produce roots higher up on the stalk. The other things on a tomato you wanna do are remove any suckers, which are places in the crotch of the plant between the main stem and the side shoots. And those just draw energy away. And we want to really force this plant to get tall and go onto the trellis that we're going to make. And I've got a video all about pruning tomatoes as well. Any dead or dying leaves on a plant, it's better just to remove them. Okay, so here's the configuration that we came up with. We want to make sure that there's enough space in between so things, once they're bigger, will be able to get lots of room and light. And you'll notice that it's kind of a diamond pattern here. Planting in a diamond pattern is the best way to get the most light and air to all of your plants. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and plant our tomato and pepper right now. Peppers are planted at the soil surface level, so where you see the top of the soil in that pot, you're gonna match that up with the top of the surface here. So you just wanna dig a hole and put it in. The tomato, I'm gonna plant it to that first stem there. So I'm gonna plant a little bit of that stem in there, because like I said, the tomato's able to get more roots on the stem by doing that, and it'll allow the plant to get more nutrients and water easily. So a great way is to just dig your hole and then test it by putting it in, and then you can just put your hand at the top of the surface and then see where it's gonna hit. So that looks pretty good to me. You just squeeze around the outside of the pot. I like to put my forefinger and middle finger to support the plant, let it come out. If there's a lot of roots around here, which this does not have that, but sometimes they get root bound, and that means that there's just roots are spiraling around the soil. So it helps to just kind of lightly massage the roots and get them loosened up so that they can go out into the ground easily. I'll just rest that in there, and I like to kind of hold on to the plant as you're putting the soil in so that you're not pushing it around or accidentally snapping the stem. Push the soil around, and then you can slightly compress it down to snug it in there. And when you water, that's also going to help to congeal and take out any air pockets around the root zone. And that's it.
There we go.
There we go. It's really helpful so that you remember what varieties you did. You know, your transplants are going to come with this little sticker deal. So just put it in the ground, and then you know what type of tomato you have. This right here is a beefsteak, and that right there is a Bonnie Bell, sweet bell pepper. This is a jalapeno, and that's a zucchini green squash over there. If the plants are a little smaller and weaker, you can pile up more dirt onto the stem to help support it, so if there's a lot of wind or rain, it doesn't get knocked over. We want to divide our squash, so we're gonna get 2 plants out of 1. So I'm just gonna cut it right down the middle. And whenever you're doing something like this, where you take the root ball out of the pot, you want to get it planted immediately. Don't let it sit out in the sunlight. So I pull both of them out.
Ooh, they came apart nice.
Yeah. There you go. So now you got roots on this side, roots on that side, and these will survive no problem. And now we got a 2-for-1 deal from Home Depot. So my mom's gonna plant that one. I'm gonna throw this one in the other plot. So one other thing that we could plant here using an interplanting technique would be to plant lettuce or cilantro, green onion, maybe some radish seeds in between the tomatoes, the squash, and the pepper that's gonna grow in about 30 days. You could harvest that before the squash or the tomato get big enough to shade out those plants. So you can also think about playing with the space in between plants and the days to maturity that each plant will take to grow. We're just gonna throw these in real quick. And just a little note on spacing. Now, tomatoes in a garden system, you want to space them, you know, about 2.5 feet is pretty good. If you're doing a production farm-based system, you can stack them as close as 12 inches apart. If you want to see a video on that, I can put that in the description. But this is going to be a lot easier, especially for first-time gardeners. Keep a bit more space. You want to make sure they have enough light so that you're successful. They're easier to trellis and all of that. Now, this pot that it came with has one of these compostable outer materials. It's like a cardboard material. You can plant with it in there. I'm gonna pull it off, whatever comes off really easily, because I want to let the roots kind of dive out. You can just plant these, but you know, if there's a little bit left on there, I'll probably just leave it. Got basil in the middle here as our companion plant. And basil's really nice, obviously, because it tastes good with the tomatoes, and it'll even help to resist some of the pests. So the last crop that we'll put in these beds are potatoes, because they're super high calorie, and we already have some ready to plant. Basically what you're seeing here, these are the eyes that come out of the tuber, and they're super easy to plant. You just take your knife and cut the potato in half, and you can actually split these eyes. So if I do it like this, now I took that one potato and now I've got 2 potential potato plants. You can think about these as a seed. To get your own potatoes to do this, you'll just store them in a dark place and wait, and eventually they will do this. So a real cheap way is just to go to the store, buy them organic, let them sit around. You can do the same with sweet potatoes. And once the eyes start coming out, this is even a little later than you need to wait. They're ready to go. We need to plant these out about every 12 inches, and we can fit 2 rows in this bed. You need to space them out every 2 to 3 feet in the row. Now for planting, you could dig a big trench here, or you could just take your shovel, dig down and plant, which is what I'm going to do since I don't have a lot of them. And when you plant them, you want the eyes to be facing up. And gets really tall, you're going to start piling up more dirt around it, and it'll be able to send off more nodes that are going to create more potatoes for you. So check out some other videos to learn how to grow potatoes, but they'll take about 70 to 120 days depending on the variety before you harvest them. So the last couple things that I'll mention, just check it out. My mom put these tomato cages here, so this is going to be how we will trellis these up. If you want to check out a more advanced trellis or some other ways to trellis, I have got videos on those that I'll put in the description. One last thing to mention is rodents and rabbits, things like that. So we're going to be putting up a fencing here basically to keep them out so they don't come in and eat our baby seedlings. So that'll depend on your area though. So you can get fencing like this from any type of hardware store, Lowe's, Home Depot, and stakes that you can put into your garden beds. Also, bird netting is another cheap way that works really well to cover. You can make little hoops from 9-gauge wire or 1/2-inch EMT conduit. There's a lot of different ways that you could build protective structures for your garden. So the final step is just to water these in. They need water immediately after being planted. Get the ground saturated so that they have plenty of water. The plants are going to be a bit weaker in that first week while they get acclimated to the new home that they're in. We are going to actually add some nutrients to our water. Now this isn't necessary, but since I have the extra nutrients, I want to show you guys some more techniques. So for this, we're going to add in some of my fish emulsion and seaweed. That provides NPK, nitrogen, phosphate and potassium, and all the minerals that they're going to need. I also have some of my Korean natural farming inputs, such as water-soluble calcium, calcium phosphate, and we're also going to water in some more azomite. I'll mix that into the water as well, and then make a really beautiful nutrient blend there and water in with that so that the plants will have everything that they could possibly need right from the start. But if you're growing in great compost, don't worry about it. That will also provide enough nutrition. This is just something extra that you can do, and I want to inform you about. All right, so now we're going to make our nutrient water. I'm not going to go into depth on all this to you guys, but I've got other videos about it, and I will make more videos about this sort of stuff in the future. OHN, or Oriental Herbal Medicine, it's a bunch of extracted herbs, garlic, licorice, a bunch of other ones. This is calcium phosphate and calcium. This helps with the structure of the plant, helping it to build good root systems, good fruit. This is a FPJ, a fermented plant juice. This has different plant enzymes and nutrients, bacteria. This is IMO2. This is wild harvested biology. This is fish emulsion and seaweed. We'll do some more azomite as well. Now you could get some products online, and I'll put some links in the description. That's easy, ready to go. These other things, these are things that I made and things that I'm going to be talking a lot more about on my channel, so be sure to subscribe so you can learn how to make all your own nutrients at home for very, very low cost. So now we're going to dilute with rainwater here, and my parents have a super cool rainwater setup actually. They have all these 250-gallon water tanks. So yeah, let's go ahead and add the water. So we're gonna water in with this first. And soil, if it's dry, it's deceptive how much water can actually be held in the soil. So we may add this and check the soil and see that it's still dry underneath, which means we'll come back in with a hose and water this in further. So this soil was already pretty wet from our rain, so as I stick my finger down in there, I can see it's soaked all the way down. We will come in with a hose though, after we plant our seeds, and just give it a final soaking to make sure it's fully wet all the way around the root zone. But a great way to check if your plant has enough moisture is just to dig back the soil about an inch. Now when you're initially watering, you want to do a deep watering. I'm a big fan of doing deep watering less often, and that's going to more mimic what rainfall is going to be like. Okay, so now let's get into seeds. First, we're going to do direct seeding right into the bed. Some crops that you can direct seed are things like root vegetables, beets, radish, carrots, beans, bush beans. You can of course direct seed things like lettuce and spinach as well. Some things are better to do in cell trays just because it's a little bit easier. You can keep them protected, make sure that they sprout, and then you put them into the ground when they're big enough. So I'll show you guys how to do cell trays right after this. So for the direct seeding here, we're just gonna do beets, radish, and carrots. All these seeds are from True Leaf Market. They're a great seed company that I'd highly recommend, and I'll put the link in the description. But we're gonna do the rainbow blend of carrots, Chioggia beets, which are really beautiful when you cut them. They have a candy cane striped pattern, and then French breakfast radishes, which are really juicy, mild, not very spicy radish. So for this, we just need to make some lines, places, little furrows where we can put the seeds. So I just like to take a big stick and just pull it all the way across. Now, if you've seen my other videos and my farm, you know I use a direct seeder like the Earthway seeder, but you can't really do that in a raised bed like this. So you could seed these horizontally. You could also see them parallel with your bed here. It's just gonna depend. You can do it either way and be successful. We have our lines running vertically here, so we're gonna do them in line with our irrigation lines. If you wanna have more variety or try to stack more types of plants in here, then doing it the horizontal way is kind of nice because you could fit more rows in here. So it just comes down to personal preference, and we're gonna go vertically to give my parents a lot more vegetables of only 3 types. I just like to use a stick or something like that just because it makes it a little bit less effort. We're trying to plant these seeds about a ½ inch down. The larger a seed is, the deeper it typically needs to go, but most of your veggies will do fine at 1/2 inch. Carrots do better at about 1/4 inch. They're the highest planted seeds. Beets you can do about 1/2 to 3/4 inch. Something like a bean or corn seed that's huge can go down about 1 inch. Beans can be 3/4 inch. So just to give you guys some examples of how to plant these. So we're just gonna clean these lines up a little bit. We're gonna do 2 rows of carrots, 1 row of radish, 1 row of beets. So this row, I'm gonna make sure that I get it flat and not too deep for the carrots. And if you go a little bit too deep, when you cover the seeds at the end, you can just lightly cover them. And so that if you made your holes a little bit too deep for the seeds, it's just a way of getting around that. Whereas the ones my mom did, they're radishes and beets, so if they're a little bit deeper, that'll be great. And we want to be sure at the end when we cover them that they're only about 1/2 inch in depth. So now as far as the seeding density, how many seeds you're going to drop in here, you can just do it by hand. And I'm doing way too many. That's an example of overseeding. That's too much. When these sprout up, we're gonna have to thin them down a little bit. If you leave it this thick, the carrot won't be able to grow into a really big root. So let me try that again. So here's the example of a good seeding density for the carrot seed. That's gonna come out really nice and produce nice big carrots. That is way too many seeds. That's gonna require you to come back and thin them out if you wanna have nice big carrots. So just be careful as you're seeding to not do too many. It might even be a good idea, especially if you're starting out, to take a picture of how many seeds this looked like so that when they sprout up, you can learn from the experience so that next time you don't do as many or maybe you do more. Because a lot of this is going to come by trial and error for you.
If all of these sprout, I'll be able to feed the entire neighborhood.
Yeah. So here's an example of some really good beet seeding density. And don't worry, if some of them sprout close to each other, one will get bigger than the other. You can harvest that one first and let the other one grow larger, and that's what I did on my farm. This is a great way to get more harvest in the same amount of area. These are the radish seeds, and that's a nice looking density. Radish you can overseed a bit more and still have great radishes, so this looks great. So on the carrots, when we cover them, we're just gonna really lightly cover them. That's a little bit too much. They only need about 1/4 inch of covering. They barely anything, and they'll be fine. We made these furrows a bit too big. That's okay, because you can kind of correct that mistake for whatever seeds you have as you cover them. A lot more leeway. So for that, we can just grab the furrow and close it like this. We want these to be covered 1/2 inch. And then one thing you can do is come back and then pat it down. And that's gonna give the perfect seed to soil contact. So once we add water, it's going to help these germinate perfectly. Okay, so that's it. And now all we need to do is just water these down with a hose. We can use our irrigation lines, and those will help to keep it wet. But for germinating seeds, it's really important that once they're wet, you keep them wet. And especially for carrots, if you get the carrots wet, they start germinating, and then they dry out, they will die. So if you're having a problem getting your carrots to germinate, keeping them wet may be the issue that you're facing. Some people will tell you that if you get water on the leaves, it'll actually refract the light and it can burn your leaves, but that is not true. You can get plant leaves wet and they're completely fine. I would recommend though, don't water leaves of your plants in the evening, because then that moisture is gonna sit on the plants all night long. So things for like cucumbers and tomatoes, that can cause fungal issues developing in your plant. So, and even during the day, I don't water the leaves of my cucumbers or tomatoes unless I'm foliar feeding, which means feeding the plants nutrition through the leaves. And in that case, you can do that in the evening or early morning because you want the water to sit on those leaves, inoculating biology and nutrients into those leaves. So now we just want to make sure and check to see how wet or dry this is. And by checking, it needs more water. So we want to make sure that it's for sure an inch down of wet. And like I said, soil will take a lot of water. So you may need to do this 2, 3, or even 4 times depending on how dry your soil is to begin with. Notice how big the distance is between that summer squash to the tomato and the pepper. Summer squashes get gigantic, so you'd really need a 3 by 3 foot area for them, or as they continue to vine and get longer, you can put them on the side of your bed. Once they get big enough, you can drape them over the edge of the garden bed and they'll continue to grow out on the ground surrounding the bed, and they're getting the nutrients from this good soil where their roots are down here. And that's another great way that you can grow more in less space. You can do this with a winter squash like a pumpkin or a butternut squash as well. Nice, so now that's super wet in there. That'll be good enough to germinate. And then we'll just come every day, give it a little bit more water until we see the plants germinate and pop out of the ground. And we're gonna continue to make sure that they're very wet for that first week until the plants get taller and they show their first true leaves. So the first 2 leaves that come out of most plants are their cotyledon stage leaves. Those are the first ones that allow them to get sunlight and then put out the next true leaves, which are the leaves that the plant will put out for the rest of its life. So once the plants are about 2, 3 weeks old out of the ground, they're going to develop a root system, and that root system is going to go out and seek water. At that point, you don't want to overwater and water them every single day. That may be required in the heat of summer. If you have 90 or 100 degree temperatures, you probably are going to need to water every day. But if it's a cloudy day or temperatures in the 80s, you're going to want to wait. Once plants get really established, like a huge tomato plant, even if it is 100 degrees, you don't need to water every day because the roots are going to go out and find that water for the plant. So it's actually better to let the plant seek out that water, and you're helping to train the roots to do that by not giving it water every single day. If you give it water every day, you know, it's going to be comfortable. It's not going to want to seek out and create a bigger root system because they're going to think, hey, I've got everything I need right here in the top. But you want them to really seek out and expand their root system. So watering deeply, less often, once the plant is in its adult stage, is a way to make that happen. So that's how I recommend watering once the plant is full grown. So one final note on watering. Today it was about 70 degrees and cloudy all day long. And the beds are already really wet. They don't need any more water. So I would not want to water today. Keep in mind the temperature and the sun and the water that your beds are currently at before you decide to water more. And if I check any of the transplants here, also super wet. So if you check and there's already plenty of water, you can actually do more damage by adding more water and keeping everything too wet. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about if you need to water. So another fantastic way to garden is to use a big container like this. So I'm just going to show you how I would set a large pot up for planting strawberries. But you could put anything in here. You could put a bunch of herbs. You could put lettuce, kale, and chard. Whatever you'd like. You can get one of these just from any of your hardware stores. Drill some holes in the bottom for drainage, and then we just need to add soil, which we're going to use the Kellogg's potting mix again, and then we're going to add in some of our own fertilizer, azomite, and then that nutrient water that I created as well. Okay, so now we want to make sure we leave enough room for our tomato or our strawberry in here. So next we're going to add our fertilizer, our azomite, and just mix that into the top like 6 inches. You don't need to mix it throughout the soil all the way to the bottom. The roots aren't even going to go down there, at least for a long time. And when you water, that's going to help to incorporate it down into those lower areas. So we're just going to mix the top here because this is an enclosed pot, mixing this up is a good thing to do. And then after this, I would just keep adding nutrients to the top. It's called top dressing. You don't need to mix nutrients in anymore after this. Okay, and now we're ready for our strawberry. So I'll just pull the soil to the side here.
Doesn't need much pulling away. The roots aren't very established yet. A little bit more.
A little more? Okay. And then we just want to put it in the center of the pot. All right. And then maybe we'll add a little more soil to this side here. Make sure everything's covered nice and well. Push it down a little. And that's it. Now we're just going to water this in.
Also, this is a way that I'm keeping all my berries together. I've got blackberries, I have goji berries in barrels like this that are surrounding the same area.
So now we'll throw in our nutrient water. Because this is already a fairly big plant, we'll water this every couple days, and once, you know, a week or two from now, the roots will really start to branch out, and we can water it less and less, you know, every 3 to 5 days probably, until it gets really hot here in the summer where it's going to require more water. And again, you can just pull back a little bit of soil, see if it's dry. If it is dry, about 1 inch or 2 down, then give the plant more water. And we'll also water it a little bit more right now to make sure the entire root zone is completely wet. Okay, so the final major gardening skill that you need to know to be a successful gardener is how to start your own seeds. So you can get cell trays. These are never sink cell trays. I'll put a link to the video if you want to find more about cell trays and the different types. But if you're just getting started, I'd recommend just your standard 50 to 100 cell tray, and I'll put a link below for you guys. Bootstrap Farmer makes really high quality ones that'll last forever. So they have these individual holes where you're going to put the soil and then plant your seeds. We're just going to use the Kellogg's Raised Gardening Bed Mix because it has perlite, it has good nutrition, everything ready to go, and it's $10 a bag. So if you have that in your local area, that's a really great one. Or try to find another propagation mix that you could use. Or I've got a video about how you can make your own propagation mix if you have all the different raw ingredients. So we're just going to put our soil in. If you're wondering what these little white rocks are, that's called perlite. Perlite allows for airflow and water flow so that there's good drainage. Now some people will mix in a fertilizer or worm castings into their propagation mix, and that's a great thing that you can do to get really good nutrition for your plants from the beginning. This seedling mix will work really good though, and it already has worm castings and a fertilizer in there. So now I'm just going to kind of let it drop and see if there's any areas I can give a little bit more soil to. And you can just run your hand across the top, and that'll help to make it flat and real easy for you. Now the next step is to soak these, get them completely soaked all the way through to the bottom of the cell. Just like when we watered in our seeds, it's the same concept. You've got to keep your seeds wet the entire time to germinate. And investing in a nice water wand is a great idea. This thing is not the best. Okay, so now I can just dig down a little and check. Yeah, we're completely soaked. So the next step is we want to make little 1/2 inch holes for our seeds. So I like to use my finger and I just poke it down a little bit. And we're going to come at the end once we plant our seeds and put soil over the top. So just keep that in mind as you're poking your holes. So this is set up for most seeds now, 1/2 inch. So here's the way I like to approach planting and trying to decide how many cells I want to dedicate to each type of plant. I either like to separate them out by row here. So there's 12 here. So I could have 12 different types and get 6 of each type. Or I could do it vertically. Maybe I want a lot more of each plant. So I get 12 rows of 6 different types of plants. We have 9 different types of plants here. So I'm going to go for the 12 row spacing here. Now the other thing to keep in mind is how much of each plant you want. So something like a Swiss chard or a kale, you know, for a family of 4, if you have about 5 kale plants, that's gonna be more than enough kale that you guys will be able to eat. And that's the same with your basil. You know, 5 to 10 plants max is what is the most that you're gonna need. Oh, the bunching onions though, you'll need a lot of those. So I might dedicate 2 rows to the bunching onions. So I did forget one type of seeds, and this is gonna be a lettuce blend. So we'll do 2 rows of that as well. But lettuce is really great because you can get a continual harvest and just harvest around the outside of the plant rather than harvesting the whole head. That's a great way to do it for home gardeners. So when doing the seeds, I like to pour it into one of my hands and then grab with my other hand and my 2 fingers and then just rub my fingers slowly back and forth and drop a couple of seeds in. For lettuce and any of these seeds, you want to put, you know, about 2 to 3 seeds per cell so that you can guarantee germination. And the beauty of starting them in a cell tray is that they're very easy to come back and thin to one plant, so you have a perfect large transplant ready to go out into your garden. So next we'll do the bunching onion. And a bunching onion is unique because you don't need to thin them. You can plant 3, 4, 5 all together. So when these sprout up, I'll just plant whatever's there. I'm not actually gonna thin them. But the rest of these, like spinach, cilantro, Swiss chard, kale, tatsoi, all that we're gonna go down to one plant. Now Swiss chard, this type of seed is called a germ seed. So inside of these, there's actually multiple seeds. So you really only need to do 1. If you're real worried about it, you could do 2. If you accidentally drop 2, don't worry about that. Tatsoi is a type of, it's called Asian spinach. And for tatsoi, these seeds look identical to kale and broccoli seeds. So if you're not familiar with what these plants look like, it's a good idea to either label your seeds or space them out accordingly. So rather than putting my kale right next to the tatsoi, I'll put it way over here on this other side. That way, without labeling, I can know that they're different types of plants, and it will be easier to tell the difference for me. Next, we've got some herbs. So this is dill seed, and this is dill that I saved from plants that I grew from, I don't know, 3 years ago probably now. So a little bit older seed, I'll put a couple more seeds in there just because the germination rate will go down a bit. Cilantro, do 2 to 3 of these in there. Whoop. If you drop too many, don't worry about it. You can always thin them out. Spinach seed. And this is some Genovese basil. This is my favorite type of basil. The fragrance and the flavor is just the best. It's an Italian heirloom basil. And then the final, we're gonna do some sunflower seeds. These are also seeds that I saved. Like I said earlier, the sunflower seeds, I'm just gonna push them in deeper with my fingers here to make sure they have enough depth. And now all of this is ready to receive soil over the top. Then you can just rub over the top to get it nice and even. Spread it out, just like that. And now the final step is just gonna be to water this. And then every single day, I'll come out and water these. In the summertime, you'll need to water probably twice a day, maybe even 3 times depending on the spot. You can even put this in partial shade in the beginning so that the soil doesn't dry out as quickly. So I'm gonna go put this probably under the pomegranate trees and then just water it every day until I see germination. So here we are about 7 days later. We can see the chard, the kale and the tatsoi are starting to sprout now, and even some of the lettuce seedlings here. So things are off to a real good start, and then the next week the rest of them will start sprouting. And I just wanted to mention a couple things about where I placed my seeds. I actually put them over here on this black plastic. All my farming stuff was covered up, and the black plastic attracted a lot of heat, and I kind of used that as a mock heat mat. So temperatures were in the high 60s, low 70s. I just wanted to try and heat up the seedlings a little bit more to help the germination process. That's another thing that you can do with seedlings is you can get what's called a heat mat and put the heat mat underneath so that if you have lower temperatures or if you're starting your seeds out in a much colder climate, the heat mat is going to really help you get a better germination rate. And now I'm just going to keep watering these once a day. I did skip one day of watering when it was just cloudy all day because I noticed they were plenty wet. And these will grow for about 2-3 weeks. Once the seedlings get, about yay tall and they have their true leaves, they will be ready to be planted. Another thing you can do to test to see if they're ready is if your cell tray has some deep enough holes, you can kind of poke them from underneath, or you can squeeze the side and grab from the base of the plant and pull the plant up and out, and you'll see how much roots that they have. They should have a good amount of roots developed before you plant them. And if the plant is tall enough and has good sized true leaves, then that'll be the case. Today's 5th installment of this series is going to be about irrigation, and I'm going to show you 2 different ways to set up simple gardening irrigation that's going to be cheap and very efficient on your watering bill. All of my drip irrigation I buy from dripdepot.com. They're just a fantastic company to work with, great prices, the quality is excellent. I've been using them for the last 3.5 years and I have 0 complaints about them or their products. If you want to buy any drip parts or tools, I highly recommend them. And I have a link down in the description that if you click through that and buy through them, it's an affiliate link that gives me a small kickback. So that's just a great way that you can support the channel, getting something that you need and at no cost to you. So I really appreciate you guys using the link. And I know that you're going to be super happy with their service as well. And if you missed any of the other 5 parts of the gardening series or any of the live streams that happened later in the day where I answer all of your questions for 1 hour, I put all the links down in the description so you can check those out. And I have a lot of other irrigation videos that I've made over the last few years that should really help you if you want to build a more complex irrigation system, a larger one, or even for a smaller system like using grow bags and things like that. And I'll put all those videos in the description as well. So let's get started. And first I'm just going to introduce you guys to a couple different types of irrigation systems and some different terms that you'll need to know moving forward. So we're going to talk about 3 different types of lines: poly lines, emitter or spaghetti line, and drip tape. Each one of these has their uses, advantages, and disadvantages, and I'll speak about each one. So the first one let's talk about is your main line, your poly line. So this and all these parts are made from a long-lasting UV-resistant plastic. This is 1/2 inch. You can also buy 3/4 inch or 1 inch main line. For a small garden, you'll really only need a 1/2 inch. For a larger garden, let's say 500 square feet or more worth of lines, then I recommend a 3/4 inch main line. And on dripdepot.com, they have a irrigation calculator where you can put in the length of lines, the gallon per hour of the lines, your flow rate, pressure, all of those different things, and then it'll calculate how much line that you can do on the amount of pressure that you have. So I'll put those tools in the links in the description. So this is the tubing that's going to deliver your water from your valve or your hose faucet to your beds. Then from here, we deliver the water to the beds through either emitter line or drip tape. So here's an example of emitter line or spaghetti line. And for intensive gardening, I recommend every 6-inch emitters. So where this little bump is, this is where it releases the water, and they come out at different flow rates. I like the higher rates, so around 0.46 gallons per hour. So then every 6-inch you have one, so that when you do a real intensively planted garden, it's gonna give plenty of water to your plants and your soil. And what's nice about these is that they're really small, so they're easy to maneuver and get around your plants, take in and out. And they don't get in the way when your seeds are germinating. One disadvantage to these though is that they get clogged fairly easily, especially if you have hard water. And I'll show you guys in this one irrigation bed that we're gonna fix today at my parents' place. These spaghetti lines are all, like most of them are clogged. and that's why we're going to replace them, and we're going to replace them with my special drip tape system that I used at my market garden, and I'm going to adapt it to a raised bed garden so that you guys can see that. And this is, I think, the best way to set up irrigation in terms of cost, reliability, and just even spread of water overall. But if you want something that's just ready to go, not complicated at all, I like these spaghetti lines, and I'm going to show you the spaghetti line setup and this more complex but better drip tape setup. So now we have drip tape, and drip tape is just like the emitter line, but as you can see, it looks like tape and it lays flat. It is a bit wider, so it can get in the way of things a little bit, but in general, it's really not bad at all. And like I said, I use this in a super productive market garden, and all farms use this stuff if they're not using overhead irrigation. So just like the emitter line, every 6 inches, there's a spot where the water will come out. These are way less prone to clogging, and I really don't have problems with these clogging ever because of the way that these work. Because these will, when you fill it up with water, this will expand into a tube, so it's much more difficult even for hard water to clog these, but hard water can eventually clog these up, but it's very cheap to replace these. And I like to use the thickest 15 mil plastic because those can handle a 15 psi pressure regulator. And the higher pressure allows more flow rate, more water coming out more quickly, so you don't have to leave the irrigation timer on, the valves on is long, and prevents clogging more. So let me show you the emitter line setup, and then we're gonna go and then we're gonna modify my parents' existing spaghetti line or emitter line setup and show you how I would do that. So at my parents' house, they have a more complex irrigation system where it's running off of this timer, and this runs to some electronic valves that are inside of this box, which I'm not going to show you guys that. The best way for a home garden, I think, is to run everything off of a faucet. But these valves run out and over here. I tapped into the PVC that runs underneath the deck here, and then I attached the 1/2 inch line right here to that. So that's where I'm getting, when I turn that timer on, the water's flowing to this 1/2 inch. So for your home setup, just imagine this is going to a hose faucet. This 1/2 inch line's running here. Now I have a 1/4 inch line with no holes in it running to a on-off valve. I like to use the on-off valves instead of the transfer barb. A transfer barb is what connects the 1/4 inch to 1/4 inch. So that's what I'm using here. I'll pull it so you can see it. And with this, you can control pressure or completely turn off one of these lines. So it gives you a lot of control, and I really like that with the emitter lines. We'll just be replacing these with a drip tape setup. So that's one of the beds, and then you can see there's a T that comes off, another T here, and an on and off valve. And I like to have valves in between each section or plot so that if I want to, I can turn one of these off in case maybe the other bed's, it's too wet, but this bed needs water. That way I can run the single valve from the timer on and then have control over which beds are getting water. So this one runs all the way here. You can run the poly line above ground, which is great, or you can just throw, an inch or two of dirt if you want to keep it protected from the sun, but it lasts a long time in the sunlight. And then it's the same setup over here. That's an example of the transfer barb. And you punch into the 1/2 inch line with a couple different tools. So these lines are working perfectly. They're not clogged at all. So that's why we're going to be leaving these alone. Now in these, you might be able to see that we're getting water at the beginning of the lines here, but then at the ends, it's completely dry and there's nothing coming out. We tried poking them with a knife to unclog them, but they're just completely clogged. So we just need to get rid of these and replace them. So now let's talk about your timers. I'm a big fan of the Orbit timers. I've had great success with them. They've worked for years off of the original batteries. It never failed on me. The valves never broke, and I've used 5 different ones over the last 3 years for my different valves, and I've been very happy with them. They could have a little bit more custom control, but for a home-based garden, they're just perfect. So what's great about these is they will attach to a hose faucet. So first you're going to put your particle filter on, then you'll put your timer, and if you want, you can get like a Boogie Brew filter. This filters out chlorine and heavy metals, and just makes your water a lot better, and it'll make the soil, it'll help the soil biology thrive a bit better. I always use these at my farm. It's just a very simple filter that's going to just make the water a bit cleaner for your plants and your soil. So you can put that on next, and then your timer. On a faucet like this, it's a bit harder to have this set up because it's so long. So next would go your timer, then your pressure regulator on the valve. This is an extra manual valve where you can hook up a hose to this. And then you could run your 1/2 inch poly line from here, and they have a compression fitting that you shove onto the line, and then that just screws on to the regulator here. Or, like I said, if you want to maintain pressure all the way to the bed, then you'll just adapt the 1/2 inch compression to the 3/4 inch hose threaded fitting. Put that on here, run it to your bed, and then you'll put the pressure regulator on the 1/2 inch going into your bed. And there's something that you should know. There's something called hose threaded fittings, and there's pipe threaded fittings. Pipe threaded is for like a PVC pipe. Hose thread is for, just like it sounds, for a normal hose. And if you buy the wrong one, it will not thread correctly. The hose threaded fitting is a bit wider spaced. The pipe threaded is a bit skinnier threaded. So all the faucets coming out of your house, that's called a hose thread. Now what this faucet is attached to going into this wall, this would be a pipe thread. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your fittings. Stuff for irrigation though is pretty universally hose threaded, but you can buy pipe threaded stuff for your irrigation, so just keep that in mind. But all of this orbit stuff is all hose threaded. Pressure regulators, they can come in pipe or hose threaded. But because we're using my parents' more advanced like landscaping valve setup, we're running it off of that. So we're just gonna imagine that the 1/2 inch over there that we're about to go work on is coming from a timer setup more like this. Or you may have a landscape irrigation setup like my parents have, and for that you're just gonna need to tap into the PVC pipe, adapt that to 1/2 inch, and for that you are definitely going to need a pressure regulator because those landscaping lines are much higher pressure. So you'll just buy the pressure regulator that you'll need, whether you're using the emitter line, which is 25 psi, and you'll just check your line. Some of them can go up to 40 psi, I believe. So it'll say that on the packaging for the line that you buy. 15 psi or 10 psi, depending on which type of drip tape that you buy. And the links down in the description, I'll put some notes there to help you guys when purchasing. And of course you can call Drip Depot and they can help consult you on what you should buy as well. They're really helpful on the phone. And I have many other videos explaining some of this stuff in more depth if this wasn't enough for you. Because irrigation is a bit confusing, especially when dealing with all the fittings, the pressures, and all of that. Especially when you're hearing this stuff at first, it kind of gets a bit jumbled in your mind. So don't worry about that. I'll try to make it a little bit easier for you in the instructions below. So what we're going to do is put a T right here, run 1/2 inch up and then into the bed, and create our new drip tape emitter system. So I want you guys to think about this. This 1/2 inch is running from the valve. Now, coming from the PVC into this 1/2 inch, that's where we could run this 15 psi pressure regulator, and then boom, into this 1/2 inch line. Now I don't have the other piece that I need for this regulator, but that's okay because I'm going to regulate the pressure with the valve that we're going to attach here. Now for you running off of a hose faucet valve, you can put the PSI regulator off of the timer and then adapt it And the 1/2 inch, this is a compression fitting. The 1/2 inch goes inside of there, and it would bring it all the way here to the beginning of your garden bed. So what I want to do is raise this up and put the 1/2 inch right at the edge of my garden bed here. So for the tee, we're going to bring it in, and in between here, the 1/2 inch will go and it'll stop here on each side. So I'm just going to mock it up and then cut the line. And now we'll put it on. And see, once I put it on that side, see how much room we have on there? And you could even put it on one side first and then cut this side to length. That'd be a really safe way to do it. So now we're ready to get the 1/2 inch up and into the bed. And 1/2 inch is super cheap. You can get 500 feet of this stuff for like 50 bucks. So now we'll put this in. And it's just like a bunch of Lego pieces. What we're gonna do now, we're gonna adapt my on and off valve system that I used in my market garden for a raised bed system. So we're gonna take this apart a little bit, and I'll put a link for the video of how to actually make these if you wanna do in-ground beds, but I'm gonna show you a better way to adapt these for a garden bed. So what I wanna have happen is have this 1/2 inch run completely flush with the backboard here. So I know this 1/2 inch is gonna go inside about this much, and I want it to be pretty flush, so I'm gonna cut it right there. And mock it up one more time to check it. Yeah, that'll be really good. And now we're gonna run a 1/2 inch piece all the way across to the other end and cap it off. I'm gonna leave this 1/2 inch open because we wanna run water through this line to clean out anything that's in here, whether that's spiders or insects or dirt that got clogged in here. So we're gonna blow it out. Then we're gonna come back and pop some holes into the line, and then we can attach our drip tape adapter pieces. And there's 2 different types that I'll show you to help you make a decision on what you would like. And there's one more piece that I'm gonna add to this, which is this valve, and that way we can turn our bed on and off if we would like to. And this is the really cool kind that you can twist on and off, so it's not like a normal compression, because you can take them off and then reuse it. So that's why I really like this type. Now for the valve, I could put it in a couple places. I could put it here, I could put it down here, and I will just kind of nail this into place. It's got a nice bend here. It's not getting a kink in it at all. And I could have made this a little bit better, but I'm kind of in a rush to finish this so I can get to the live stream. So I think I'll just be happy with this. We'll just attach this to the board, and then we'll run the valve right here. So we just need to cut in. And this is what's so nice about this kind of 1/2 inch adapter piece. You can shove the 1/2 inch on there. You twist this, and now it makes a perfect watertight connection, but I can always take this off and reuse it. And you're probably seeing a bunch of dirt on here, and that's why we really need to blow the line out before we attach anything else. Because if we get any dirt in the drip tape, there's a high chance that it could clog. So if we take the precaution now and blow everything out at each step, you're way less likely to have any issues with clogging later on. Awesome, that looks great. And we just got a little creative there and just made it work. I could do this a lot cleaner, but this is gonna work great. So let's move on to the next step, punch our holes, and then we'll attach our drip tape. Almost done. So here are the tools that you use to punch into a 1/2 inch line. This is your most basic and cheap one where you shove it in and make the hole. This is my personal favorite, especially if you have to do a lot of lines, because you can just put the 1/2 inch in between here, you squeeze, and it makes a perfect hole. This is one that was given to me, but it's kind of nice because it has a knife so that you can cut the pipe. And then on this end, it has a punch. So you just press it down, and that punches the line and makes a hole so that you can put in your transfer barb. And then of course, I always keep my Felco pruners with me. I use these for everything around the garden. I highly recommend this brand of pruner. I've had these for 8 years, and I can cut irrigation with them, I can prune trees with them, I can thin out seedlings, whatever I need to do, I use these pruners. So we just blew out our main line here, nice and clean. Now we're ready to poke our holes. We always want to make sure that our drip lines are laid out equidistant so that we get a perfectly even water spread. So I've put out this tape measure here to help us do that. I'm going to be poking a hole at 8 inches. This is a 4-foot box. So if I start at 8 and I do one every 12 inches, it gives me basically a perfect layout for this box. And I'm going to use my little Rainbird poker here. We want to double check you're poking from the correct side. And when you're poking your holes, you want to make sure that it'll be on the flat side of the tubing here. So either perfectly parallel with the ground or like slightly up is better than it being down, because this needs to poke in right here. So if it was down, it'd be kind of a bad angle. So you want to make it even or slightly up. Now we're going to put in our transfer barbs, which will transfer from 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch into drip tape connection. And I'll put links in the description for these different pieces so it's easier for you to find. Now I've got some that have valves on them. I only had 3 of them left. So one of them will be one that does not have a valve. This is how I ran all of mine at the farm, and I ran, just using one main valve. But for my parents' little garden bed here, I'll give them a little bit more control so that they can turn each individual line on and off, except for this one. Now all you gotta do is just push this end inside of the hose, and when it's completely in, it'll make a nice popping sound. Just like that. And as you're doing all this work, just be extra careful to keep dirt out of the line. But we are gonna blow these lines out one last time before we connect everything. So we'll get them perfectly clean. So all 4 are in. Now we just need to cut our drip tape to length, and we need to make another header piece that's going to match this one. So for making the header piece, I am just gonna line it right up here. And I wanna make sure that I have enough length so that I can fold these over in order to tie them off. And if you check out my video on how to make these in mass for more of a market garden, larger size, you'll notice I have a whole process of how to do this, so it's really efficient and doesn't take as long. And then as I go, I'll just make sure that these holes stay lined up. And then I'm just gonna, with a hose, I'm just gonna blow this out really quick. And then now we can tie this guy off. And I'll fold it back the opposite direction so I can have some more room. Okay. Now I'm gonna go throw this at the other end and put some irrigation tees to hold it in place, and then we can measure out our drip tape and cut it to length. Now on the drip tape itself, you just wanna, give enough length so that it could fit on here. If it's too close to your wood of your box or something, take that into consideration. If maybe you wanna have a little bit more length away for the very first dripper. So before I add any of my drip tape, I wanna blow this out real quick. And now attach. Okay, give it a little tug to make sure it's nice and stuck on there. And then you want to make sure when you screw it on to completely unscrew before you screw it forward to make sure it's very tight, because these can blow off if the pressure is too high. So now I'm just going to trim these up and get them as tight as possible. And as drip tape gets older and expands and contracts, it will stretch a little bit. So you'll have to come back and trim them up occasionally. And you'll notice that the lines will get kind of loose looking, but once you clip them a couple times, they get really good. And then before I screw any of these on, I need to blow the tubes out. So I'm just matching it up. I'm pulling it past I know that the tubing will go right basically to the edge of the green if these are completely unscrewed. You also want to make sure that there's not a emitter in the way. And then I just cut. And slide it on. Because I don't have the right adapter for my pressure regulator, I'm just going to run this with this valve not open all the way, and that'll reduce the pressure enough so that my tape is fully pressurized, as you can see, but it's not blowing them off the adapters here. So this will be really great, and it's going to be a great system for my parents. So this is the adapted version from my market garden, and the reason to have the header at the other end is that it keeps all the lines really straight and it's flow through, which means if there's a clog, let's say in that line, and the water it goes to here and then it gets clogged, the water can flow around to that side, come back through, and still get to the other emitters. So even if there is a clog, it solves that issue. All right, so that was a bit more of a complicated episode today, but I really hope this helped give you some of the nitty-gritty details surrounding drip irrigation. And I know it's a lot to take in, but keep studying about it. And once you figure it out, it's really just like putting Lego pieces together. And if you want just the easiest way to do it, then I guess I would suggest a 1/2-inch poly main line with a 1/4-inch emitter line and using on and off valves. But like I said, I really love this drip tape system, and for all the different reasons that I mentioned. And there's links down the description to help you guys find the parts for this. So go check those out, and I'll put links to all my videos about drip irrigation and anything else that you might need to help you along the way. If you found this video helpful, be sure to share it with a friend that wants to learn how to garden, to help them get going. That would be fantastic. And be sure to like, comment. I'll be sure to help you guys if you have any questions about what we did here. I'd love to help you get started in your garden.